Hello, this is Greg Allison from Green Gregs. We got a special guest tonight, Jon Hollerman. Tonight we're going to be talking about the situation in the world, how tense it is, why you really need to prepare because we are in a dire strait. The tensions are going up, and my friend, my guest, Jon Hollerman, he is now with his new position, the Deputy Director of the U.S. Task Force on National and Homeland Security, the organization founded by none less than the late Dr. Peter Vincent Price. I am the Alabama State Director. And furthermore, Jonathan started out as a military trainer. He was trained in the area of what we call SEER, which is survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. So he is a top-notch prepper. He's written a book that's coming out, and he is the president of his own company, Grid Down Consulting. He is also on the board of directors of the Impact America, this EMP Act America, which also has General Ken Krosniak, who's been on my channel many times. And Jon's been on my channel a couple times already, too. So we're going to talk about this threat, and we're going to talk about things that you can do. And we're going to plug a few other things along the way, like Grid Down Power Up, documentary that's come out that our organizations have been quite involved in, and a couple of other things. So, Jon, tell us what you're most concerned about at this moment with everything going on in the world.
My biggest concern right now with what's going on, I am really watching what's happening in Russia, not Ukraine, but Russia. We know what's happening in Ukraine. We get news reports. We're kept up to speed with what's happening in Ukraine. I'm less concerned about what's, the warfare that's happening in there than what may start happening in Russia. We were seeing a lot of these advanced weapons start being sent to Ukraine, Patriot missiles and other longer range missiles than things that they have. If they start using some of this equipment inside Russia, if they start using cyber attacks against Russia's electric grid or blowing up, military bases inside Moscow, especially using American or German or NATO weapons, there's probably going to be some serious ramifications from that. I don't think they're going to hit the nuke button the next day, but it could escalate very quickly. They could hit the American mainland with some cyber attacks. It could go tit for tat and grow pretty quick. So that's my biggest concern right now.
Well, my biggest concern is we're playing Russian roulette right now. We're poking the bear and we're pushing it. We don't know where the real red lines are. They've told us there's red lines, and we're in a process of crossing those pretty dang quick, one after another. These tanks that we're sending over now, the M1 A2 tank, we're sending our best tank. It just don't have the most reactive high armor technology on it. We're sending, but it does have the commander scopes and the things that some of our top end technology in the avionics, electronics end of the spectrum. And the Germans are sending in their Leopard tank. They're sending in the, I believe it's the A6, which is the latest version on that. So that's not the older stuff. We're sending some really good stuff. Not only that, we're depleting our ammo levels right now. So we're putting ourselves at risk should we have to engage in another war or protracted war with anyone, to include China, which might be around the corner. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, so China's been a little surprised. I actually thought they would have maybe acted before this. I think China's really watching the world's reaction to Russia. We're poking the bear. The bear's poking us. They're poking back. Hopefully, he doesn't decide to bite back. But I think the president over China right now, he's got his hands full with apparently COVID in his country and a bunch of other things that are his economy's not doing so great. But with that said, at some point, I do anticipate him going after Taiwan before Biden's out of office, especially with how bad things kind of look politically for Biden right now. If Biden doesn't get really elected and you get a Trump or DeSantis or somebody more strong in there, I think they're going to be less likely to go after Taiwan in that scenario. So Biden's proven to be kind of a limp noodle in a suit in most of the time in foreign policy. I mean, I've been surprised a couple things that he's done, but I'm kind of surprised he's sending tanks. It seems like when we need him to be strong, he does something weak, and then when we need him to, be cautious and not start World War III, he starts sending missiles and tanks to Ukraine. So I don't know.
This might play in China's favor. I mean, if they could just sit back and watch us deplete our ammo, then we got less to take them on. So they may be. This might be the best deal in the world for China and their ambitions. Just let them play out, let them spend their stuff and weaken themselves down, and then we've got our best position ever. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I think China's just they're just watching. They're tapping their thumbs, just counting the clock, watching what's happening in Ukraine, watching how NATO gets involved. I mean, but here's the thing: we kicked Russia out of SWIFT, right? That was the big move, and I don't know that it was the right move because it had some pretty big ramifications global economy wise. But you know darn well we ain't kicking China out of SWIFT. That won't happen because like they make like everything comes from China, right? I mean, that would destroy the global economy if we kick China out of SWIFT. So I think they know. I don't know. It's hard to get in the mind of some of these guys. I've been wrong about some of the things Putin's done in the past year or two. I've been kind of shocked on some of the things that have come out. I kind of expect him to react different earlier. One person, everybody, if you're listening to this, you should check out is Tom Popick over at Foundation for Resilient Societies. He's got some really good reports on the Ukrainian power grid and why Russia did not take down their power grid on day one. And it's really fascinating stuff. And he tracks the things that are happening with their electric power grid pretty closely. And he's a smart guy, Tom, and he puts a lot of information there on his website.
Yeah, I've been meaning to get him on my channel too, and we had kind of made a preliminary contact. We just kind of missed each other in the dark. I got to get back chasing him because he's one of the early guys talking about the problems with the spent fuel rod pulls at the nuclear power plants. When I started talking, I didn't know there was anybody out there else already talking it, and I found that he was. So I thought I actually started that conversation, and then I saw that he had been talking to actually previous to me. So I'm happy to know that he's definitely been pushing that. He's a really smart guy, and so I definitely want him on this channel. So maybe you can just put a bug in his ear. I definitely got to contact him again. So
for sure.
So John, what do you assess as being the level of threat involved here? Do you have some idea for just how tense it is? Would you say if we were playing Russian roulette, how many chambers do we have, and how many rounds do we have in our in the chambers? If we're looking at a 30% risk of going to nuclear war, that would mean 2 rounds and a 6-banger. I don't know what. Of course, maybe it's just hard to assess anything, but is that something you would like to venture toward?
Sure. I mean, I know I'm probably in the very, very low minority of analysts that would say this, but I don't believe that. I don't believe there's a high risk, all out nuclear war situation brewing at this point in time. I don't think and the reason I say that, the caveat I'm using is because of super EMP weapons that these countries have developed. There's no reason for them to fire 80 or 100 ICBMs across the ocean, and we see them coming, and we fire ours, and then everybody's a glass parking lot. When they can send a submarine into the Gulf of Mexico or put a single nuclear weapon in a K-Club launcher on a cargo ship coming out of Egypt into the Gulf of Mexico, there's many ways to set off an EMP, and we've seen in their war doctrine, all of our enemy countries, EMP is the first strike attack, because if they hit us and they take down every aspect of human life in this country, including our military, they don't have to fight a war. Right? Nuclear war is World War III, right? You can win World War III in hour 1 with an EMP, and everybody knows it, right? So that is the ultimate weapon at this point. So I fear that more than I do, a lot of the pundits in the mainstream media. They really, because it's fear porn, in the media, nuclear war let's be honest. I mean, there are a lot of Russian oligarchs, the mouthpieces for Putin that we're seeing in the media coming out saying stuff. But Silnoyen, which is this woman that's real close to Putin, and I've been following her for years. She's the one that warned here a year and a half ago, right before this thing kicked off, that her anticipation was that Russia was going to invade Ukraine, U.S. was going to get involved, and then Russia was going to take down the Florida electric grid and New York City electric grid, and then we were going to take down Moscow's electric grid, and then they were going to hit us with an EMP. And she said, that is a war we're prepared to fight, and we will win that war of infrastructures. So, and then she just came out here last week making some big threats again. So again, I want to couch this with, I mean, it makes good headlines. These are, if Putin came out and said that, it'd be like pucker factor at that point, right? But I mean, he's sending his mouthpieces out there. This isn't by accident. There's a lot of these generals and stuff saying that so he can have like 3 degrees separation. Our president and our politicians do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So
I'd like to add, she is the director of RT, which is, I guess, Russia Today, the major mouthpiece of Russia, and anything that comes out of there is official. They're not allowed just to run like our news media here and just whatever they want to write and put out. No, it goes through the state. It's cleared by Putin before it's said, and she's really tight with Vladimir Putin, as you mentioned.
Yes.
I've mentioned her a few times on this channel too. So because she is one to watch and keep an eye on. You're exactly right, watching her. So that is a very important point. But really and truly, an EMP attack ultimately is as bad as a nuclear attack, because in a EMP attack, the cities, they may not die instantly, but that might be a mercy killing. They're going to starve over time. The death level from an EMP attack could be worse than just if it were just a pure nuclear attack without EMP effects, which might be hard to achieve. But
100%.
Hand in hand.
No, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. An EMP attack, I believe, would be far deadlier, because typically with nuclear war, you're going to send tactical nukes and you're going to hit military targets at first, maybe a couple, major cities, New York, Atlanta, Dallas, LA, Seattle, some of these military bases, but in your first round of volleys. But in an EMP attack, you take out every life-sustaining infrastructure our entire country has. And so Iran considers this Sharia compliant. In Iran's war doctrine, they consider EMP a Sharia compliant first strike, because they don't technically kill anybody. When they set that nuclear weapon off at 300 kilometers above the Earth's surface over Kansas or Oklahoma, nobody dies. Maybe some people that are on some planes, but nobody dies right off the bat. And they say that basically it's our own arrogance and our reliance on electricity that kills us. So they don't actually kill us; we kill ourselves, which is what's going to happen.
Well, it may also be our lack of taking the action to get our power grid hard, like you and I and several other people have been clamoring for years. We've been clamoring
Amen.
for. I mean, think back. What was it? 14 years ago now, or something like that. That the EMP task force got the congressional EMP task force, which Dr. Pry was on, got the report. The analysis said that within a year, 9 out of 10 people in our nation would be dead from societal collapse after an EMP attack of that size. If you take down a nation and like you put one over Omaha, Kansas, like you said, the nation just dies out. But I had talked with Pry about that, and I said, look, they didn't take into account the spent fuel rod pools of nuclear plants. They might have counted nuclear plants, but they weren't counting that. I don't think they even accounted for that. So, and everybody wants to pay attention to the reactors because that's where the focus is. But even the spent fuel rod pools are a very serious matter, and that's why I talk about those, because they're usually ignored. And these things could be given off radiation for decades. It's not a pretty picture at all. So there's a lot more than just the effects of losing power. And a lot of my prepper friends, they think, well, I live off grid, I'll be fine. But when the cities are suddenly starving, it's going to be like kicking a fire ant nest or hitting a hornet nest with a baseball bat. They're not going to come out, and they're going to be hunting somebody to eat.
Well, that's exactly right. I would say that the people in the country are every bit as dependent on the civilian infrastructure as the city people. So just to challenge those listening, like I live in West Virginia. There's probably 12 houses within 2 square miles of me, and 6 of them are farms. Okay, so like I live very remote, and the small town next to me, I think it's 800 or 900 people. I mean, that town is every bit reliant on those trucks rolling into the grocery store. I mean, if you stop interstate trucking in a small town like that, it's going to be every bit as devastating as downtown New York City. Yes, they may not riot and loot as quickly, but I say you probably got a couple extra days before things kind of go south, because I mean, the people that live in these small towns, they're just as dependent on the government and grocery stores as the bulk of the American people. So it's kind of a misnomer. I mean, I realize they may even have some more life skills than the quote city folk, right? But there's a difference between having more life skills and understanding how to grow your own food, how to root cellar your own food, know exactly how much food you need to store up for an entire winter. You know what I mean? There's a lot more to it than just growing a garden in your backyard.
Hey, and talking about storing food, I'm gonna do a quick little shameless plug. We got a prepwithgreg.com. We got a special right now. We can get over $200 off a 3-month supply of this food. It gives actually 2,000 calories a day plus, and there's also some other prepping deals they thrown in with this deal. So you can get other prepping supplies with it. Prepwithgreg.com, special on the 3-month supply with other prepping supplies that come in with it. It's an excellent thing because how many of the other guys offer 2,000 calories a day?
None that I know of. Most of them offer about 800. And it's funny. So on that subject, so hey, here's a good point. Have you ever read the Minnesota starvation experiment?
Oh yeah. That's what they
okay,
were so 800 calories a day, and they were starving. Actually, better than that, they were starving to death, and they got pitiful.
Yeah, they were given 1,500 calories a day, and they were still starving to death. So that was half. So their normal rations were 3,200. They were put on half rations at 1,500, and after 6 months, they looked like they stepped out of a Holocaust movie. It was pretty breathtaking. So. And most of the long-term food plans, and I tell clients all the time that they're like, "Oh yeah, I've got 2 years worth of food." I said, "Where you buy it?" And they'll give me the name, this big name, and I said, "Well, you've actually probably got about 4 months worth of calories. A serving size, a quarter cup of rice a day is not going to keep the body fed." So,
no, that's true. So prepwithgreg.com. Y'all go there and check that out. So you got a book coming out. What's your book?
So yeah, I got a. Let me reach over here. So it is. Trying to have it closer within reach, but it's Survival Theory 2. Okay, so this is a follow-up to my #1 best-selling Survival Theory. Okay, now Survival Theory 2 is kind of the culmination of my life's research and work. So I back in 2019 was the last electromagnetic defense task force that I was at. When that was over, General Quas and the leadership there asked me to write a white paper for the military on starvation because that's kind of my background. I had some research in that, and we had discussed it, and I had shown concerns about the military and food. So I spent about 6 months or 8 months fine crafting a lot of my research. We talked about Minnesota starvation experiment. You can look at Philip Zimbardo, world-renowned psychologist, 1970s Stanford prison experiment. He wrote a book called Lucifer Effect: How Good People Turn Evil, or how good people do evil. And his research is like, a German Nazi who could work on a Holocaust camp, and then 2 years later they find him. He's a dad. He works a 9 to 5. And so like how people, when you take away law and order, can step outside and put them in extreme situations, how they can step outside of their normal routines and do things that people would never suspect that they were capable of doing. So that's a fascinating book. So the Survival Theory 2, the subtitle is the psychology and physiology of starvation, human desperation, and living without rule of law in a prolonged grid down event. So that is the nature of the first probably 40% of this Survival Theory 2 is my report that I wrote for the military, explaining how the psychological effects that are going to mass starvation psychosis that's going to affect the human beings. Because a lot of kind of preppers have this, I'm going to barter my way through survival type thing, and they don't understand that the people that they're going to be dealing with are not going to be in their right mind. Right. And they're not going to, you're taking a big risk. Every human interaction you have for the first year after a grid down event is a risk, because they're sizing you up. If you're the only one on your block. Yeah.
But you trade with them, and they know what they gave you to get what they got, and they know you got what they gave you, and they're going to want it back. And so they're going to know what else you got, and they're figuring out a way to get at you, probably.
Yeah, they're going to be counting your belt notches. They're going to see, is this guy skinny? Is he gray like it and gaunt like everybody else? They're going to be sizing up everything because that's what you do when you're starving. Your senses get acute. You get tunnel vision. You start. The only thought in your brain is food. So yeah, you might have traded him. He might have gave you a chicken, and you gave him, some supplies or something like that. Some a bag of rice. That might have been his last chicken, his group's last chicken, right? And they were trading that chicken to see what you had, what they could get from you, and they're coming back tonight, right? So these are the things like that kind of mentality is like it's outside of people's what's called normalcy bias. So human normalcy bias is basically you go to work, you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you get in your car, you drive to work, you have conversations with people. Nobody's trying to kill you or size you up for your food, right? Things make sense. The decisions you make have consequences. If something happens, there's law and order. You call 911, the police show up and they help you. In this type of world scenario, that this whole system of life that you've been accustomed to since the day you were born disappears that fast. And there's a whole new world order, and it's called survival of the fittest, right? And that world order where there's no oversight, there's no judges, there's no police, there's no government, there's no military. It's every man for himself. That world is going to be so foreign to a lot of people, they're not going to be able to react or make proper decisions. They're still going to try and live and have conversations and interact with humans the same way they are doing now, not realizing that humanity has jumped into a time machine. It's way more dangerous than it was, 2 weeks before when the event happened.
Yeah, well, our veneer of civility is a bit thin, and once you get into the realm of starvation, it vanishes. So, and that's something that philosophers have written about for some time. That's not something that's just been discovered, although we always forget it, as it seems, because we take it for, our normalcy bias, we take things for granted that everything's going to continue as it has, unfortunately.
Right.
So, what do you recommend, given the threat posture we're in today, what do you recommend people do for themselves?
Well, it's difficult. So let's first start by saying that we are taught an EMP or a massive solar flare like a hurricane event. This is worst case scenario. This is America's Achilles heel. This is the worst possible thing that could happen to this country. We could have a really deadly pandemic, not like the last one, but I mean one where 20% of people were dropping dead. We could have a real serious financial collapse. There's a massive cyber attack. We're watching what's happening with artificial intelligence. Quantum computing is just around the corner. You tie Chat GPT to a quantum computer, and accelerates the things that thing can do. I mean, we're talking about. In fact, the guy that either invented or runs ChatGPT, I don't know his name off the top of my head. Just 2 days ago, there's a story. He came out and said, "We're AI, OpenAI." It was OpenAI who right. He said, "Man, he's like, this is like amazing. We're going to do great things." He goes, "But I'm also very concerned that it could be lights out with with this OpenAI." He actually used that terminology. Wow. So there's physical attacks against the grid. We're watching what's happening in Moore, North Carolina, and Oregon and Washington. The recent attacks on the substations in these states. There's a lot of things ramping up. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and what people must know is our grid is not hardened. If they take out our high voltage transformers, those things take 12 to 18 months to build. They come from South Korea and Germany, and more recently from China, which is crazy. That's a subject we can get into here in a minute. But and so the first high voltage transformers to get the grid back up and running, they're not hitting the shores for 12 to 18 months. 90% of your population is gone by the time the first one shows up. So I mean, where are you going to find a lineman or a crew to deliver that thing where it needs to go?
8 out of 10 people are dead, and given that we can't find them today anyway, so yeah, you're going to be up a creek. But the production rate of those are based on a production rate for supplying
right
needs that exist today. I mean,
copper's actually really back ordered right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is I'm here now. It may take 3 years to get one of these things, but this is the ideal situation. If you have bank accounts and electronics that are working, so you can put in the requisition, the order, and if all the infrastructure is working, so they can manufacture it, then they can ship it to you, and then you got to have everything on your side working where you can install it. I mean, if they get hit by EMPs or CME from the sun, the sun could take out the world or vast swaths of the world. So you don't know that they can operate on their side, and if they can, how do you contact them? And then if everything was in perfect working order, which won't be in this situation, if suddenly you've lost thousands of your transformers, could take 10 or 15 years once you start getting them on your loading dock to replace them. If they could manufacture them. So there's a lot of, but by then what's left of the country? I mean, you lost everybody in the first year.
Yeah, who you fixing it for, right?
Yeah. Well, this is the Humpty Dumpty to me, John. I mean, I don't know, and I don't see, and I'd like somebody to explain to me how we get back to where we're at within 100 years. I don't see it happen. I think it's going to crash, and it's going to take a long time to put all these pieces back together again and build something that works, and it'll be a different society then. I don't know how we get back to some level of operations, even if we do. I don't know that we do.
I mean, the EMP Commission warned it's a continental time machine. It literally, it's an end of civilization event, and that is the thing that's so frustrating. Last Thursday, I was down in Texas on a panel at the Texas State Capitol alongside Senator Bob Hall down there, trying to get the Texas grid hardened. There's a handful of politicians, but I've sat in enough meetings now with enough high-level people to realize that it's easy to say, oh, we need to harden the grid, but it's actually an exceptionally complicated problem that's happening right now. Okay, so you have different approaches to get the grid hard. One is the carrot approach. Let's entice the electric utilities. Hey, you can raise some of your rates, make some more money, to pay for this. Like the carrot, dangle the carrot in front of them, saying, hey, go along and harden your grid and do the right thing because you're not doing it now. Well, that's just not going to happen. After the what was the Sandy, the big power outage on the East Coast? I think it was Sandy. It was one of the big power outages took down like 2 states, and it was caused by a tree limb falling on a power line. And
so that was the whole Northeast, John. It wasn't just 12 states. That was
the whole Northeast, right?
New York and parts of Ontario and
well, so FERC stepped in and they told the industry, they said, hey, you need to come up with a comprehensive tree trimming plan to prevent this stuff from happening. It took them 8 years to develop a tree trimming plan. So this idea that we're going to turn it over to the utilities and they're going to come up with a plan, their current, I mean, we're seeing with their substations, their critical infrastructure protection standards for their substations and their gates, and they write their own standards. There's no federal oversight. Whenever somebody breaks one of their critical infrastructure protection standards, they're required to turn themselves in to their own industry. Their own industry writes the fine. They pay the fine back to their own industry coffers, their lobbying coffers at NERC, right? And now, through freedom of information, we're not even allowed to know who's breaking the security standards. Everybody needs to go and follow Michael Mabey. Grid Security Now. He covers this stuff through and through. It is atrocious what we're letting the electric utilities run roughshod over the American people. They're not fixing stuff. We can't force them to do it. So that's the other side. Is, we have the carrot approach, and then the other side is like, well, the government's going to pay for everything, and they're going to force them to harden the grid, and we'll pay for it. And they've been fighting that with tooth and nail for 20 years. That's been the approach the EMP Commission and a lot of the national leaders have taken the top-down approach at the federal level. The problem is electric utilities, they don't want federal oversight. They're the one, they can do whatever they want. If something bad happens, like in Texas, we had, I think, 240-something people died in the Texas blackout after the ice storms. If there were federal regulations on, stuff that they were cheating, we know they were cheating behind the scenes, and that's why it happened. There was an ice storm in 81 that took the power grid down. But if there was federal oversight forcing them to do this and they broke it, now they're liable. Those 240 people can sue the utility, right? Because of that, because they're breaking federal law. Right now, they can do whatever they want. They can hide what's happening. They can lie to the American people. and they want the status quo.
And that's what Mike Mabie's found. But what really frosts my boat is what Mike Mabie found. And if those that don't know, I've had Command Sergeant Major Mike Mabie on my channel several
Yes.
Now, what Mike Mabie found that really frosts my boat is that he found that they've actually spent more money lobbying against hardening the grid than they would have needed to harden the grid.
So just harden the grid. Yep.
So those expensive K-Street lawyers in Washington, D.C., they're making a killing over there just lobbying with the money that could have been used to do something useful to get our grid hardened, and then there wouldn't have to be no worry about this, no further discussion. But now they'd rather give it to those dadgum lawyers on K Street in Washington, D.C., and you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir. They've spent so the electric utility lobby is the second biggest lobbyist in Washington, D.C. behind pharmaceuticals. They spend more money than big oil in D.C. lobbying congressmen and senators to prevent more regulation. Again, they are the last industry in this country. There's no federal oversight. So you have NERC, the North American Energy Reliability Corporation, and then you have which that's like their electric utility oversight lobbyist, and then you have FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which oversees NERC. But FERC makes recommendations to NERC all the time, and they just don't follow through with it. They just don't have to.
NERC's not even permitted to write a regulation. They have to take it. I mean, FERC is not. They have to take it from NERC. So they got them. Yeah. The industry has to propose the regulation, and they just rubber stamp it at the federal level. It's a very, and they had a big revolving door between them. So it's a very incestuous relationship to serve everybody, except the industry itself.
No, you're absolutely right. Because it was like 2 years ago, like the 4 FERC commissioners were on C-SPAN. I was like listening to their talk, you know, and then when I started, like one of them was pretty solid. He was making some good points. And so I started Googling these guys and their background. The other 3 came from NERC. Like it's like you said, it's a revolving door. Like the electric utility lawyers, they end up in the federal government. They're all through DHS today. They're all through the Department of Energy today. So here's my other issue. You know, we're sitting in these groups, we're strategizing, we're trying to figure out how to get legislation through. The problem is if you force the federal government right now on the books, the science that the federal government at DHS and at DOA, they're holding up EPRI's science. What is it? Edison Policy Research, Electric Policy Research Institute. So basically the science behind hardening a grid against a GMD or solar flare or EMP, they say you only need to harden to 8 kVM, which is insane. Military standards is 85. Okay, so what they're recommending. So and EPRI, this EPRI science report,
super weapons are 200.
Right, exactly. So the EPRI is industry funded. So it's like it would be like Marlboro back in the 50s putting some doctors together and saying, "Hey, cigarettes are good for your health." You know, you're literally listening to the science from the industry who doesn't want to harden, right? Who's refusing to harden. So the problem is if we force the legislation through and put money behind it, they're only going to harden to that standard. We're kind of screwed anyway. So it's frustrating. And I know this sounds, what we need to do is we need to spread the word because the top-down approach legislation has not been working for 23 years, okay? We need to get the American people groundswell. We need to get them motivated. We need to get them marching on Washington saying, hey, it's our wives and kids, and we need to get them. And a good way to do that is our friend David Tice's documentary, Grid Down, Power Up. So if you want to plug that, it's griddownpowerup.com. You could go there. You can watch the documentary for free. You can share it with friends and family. It explains Dennis Quaid, the actor Dennis Quaid is the one that narrates it. It explains it in really easy to understand language for everyone to like understand what the threat is. And then on the back side of it, he has a take action page where you can get involved. You can find out who your local representatives are. You can there's papers there on what to send them to try and get involved and force your politician to vote for this and to fix this.
Amen. And I've had him on my channel 2 times. David Tice. And
you have David?
Yeah, I've had him on there twice. I've also had David Womack on a couple of times. He's got another similar documentary, but the one right now with Tice has just had its premiere, and he's definitely developing a good network capability for people to take action. And getting Dennis Quaid was a coup for him because he's nationally recognized and explains things well, as you said. So these are all good things for our movement. I've also set up a website called freedomrestorationfoundation.org. It's a little broader in scope than just the grid, but it's got the same tools in there. You can go in there to the Action Center page, and it tells you, once you scroll down past all our action alerts, it tells you how to find your state legislators, state legislation, federal legislation, state your federal representatives in the Congress, the House of Representatives, and your senators, and how to contact them, make phone calls, how to email them. So we go through all that in there. It is, and at the bottom, it's got all those links recapitulated. So, and I pay for that out of my own pocket. So, we're out here putting stuff out, trying to get people to take action, and that stuff can work. I've had personal experience with that. So we just need to wake people up to these facts.
Yeah.
So I like to be proactive. I mean, I'm in the prepping community, you're in the prepping community, but we're in a little different setup. We're in the preventative community because we've been trying to stop this nonsense from happening in the first place by getting our grid hardened. If we had a grid hardened, most of the things that we worry about, we wouldn't have to worry about near as much. Everything would be far more survivable that we deal with in terms of the threats we face in this nation. I mean, the economic collapse, you're going to have some problems, but you're probably not going to starve to death. Grid collapse, you're going to starve to death.
Yeah.
To me, that's a worst case scenario is the collapse of the grid. I actually did a video, and I said grid down is worse than a nuclear war. That was the title of my video, and because I'm trying to get people's attention to how important this is. Now, Dr. Pry thought that what would happen is if they really wanted to take us out, that they would hit us with the EMP and they hit us with cyber, then EMP, multi-prong attack, and then they would send the guys out to do direct kinetic attacks on the power substations. Like we've seen some poor examples of that lately, not the real good trained people that know exactly the worst things to hit, but maybe they do. Maybe they're not trying to hit those. They're just trying to get attention. You and I wouldn't take more imagination for us to discuss what could happen. But, the thing is that he was concerned that they then might follow up with taking out all the strategic weapons. Not hitting cities, but then they could turn around and ransom the cities. I mean, everybody's out there. Well, we'll just respond with our nuke submarines. No, you're not. What Jonathan here is explaining to you guys. We get EMP attack. We're not responding with anything. I mean, these are super weapons that are built to put out more field intensity than our hardening standard, which he just cited at 85 kilovolts per meter, which is more than the original one a few years ago was 50.
50. Yep.
Yeah. So it was 50. It's been up. I knew it was up some. I couldn't remember what it got up to. So 85. Okay. But 85 is far shy. And a lot of the stuff was built to 50 and it's probably not been upgraded. So the 85 is still far shy than 200 kilovolts per meter, 200,000 volts per meter. Let me explain that, in layman terms there. A voltage put on the lines, that's a very significant amount of voltage. Now, I know there's some companies out there selling little chintzy boxes they claim is going to protect your home from 42 hits of that stuff.
Thank you for saying the dark part out loud. Be very leery of snake oil stuff. I literally watched I don't even want to say the name of their web page. I watched a 15-minute video on the guy's name was Paul Giamonti, and he's a plumber, and he discovered this, and he laid out the grid down threat and the threats, and I'm like, okay, this is good. Somebody sent it to me. I don't usually click on this stuff, right? And I'm watching it, and he goes through and he says, and the power's going to be out, there's going to be suffering and all this other stuff, and he said so. He came up with the solution. His friend works for his brother works for some agency. It was this whole rigmarole, and he came up with it was some applied something rod. It was some like home built electricity producing thing that you build in your basement, and it powers your entire house. And he has the secret blueprints for him. He's going to sell them to you for $67, for the secret blueprints. But like he was like, oh, and he went to church and the power went out one day. He ran home and got it, and he took it, and the church power came on, and then the priest came or the pastor came over, put his hand on his shoulder, and said, "That's a gift from God." He's like, I just knew I had to spread it to the world. And I'm sitting there like, dude, I will knock the name of my God off your lips if I ever see this dude, right? So, I mean, literally, like, just snake oil salesman to the hilt in this
Show me
industry.
one. Just show me one of these. You hear this all the time. Show me one. Show me one more.
I know.
Show me one. Just show me one anywhere, anybody. Just somebody, just come bring one to me. Let me see it. I am an electrical engineer. I've been an electrical engineer for decades.
Right.
Tons of people working in power defense. Now, I know people from decades back that claim this stuff too, but I've never seen a one of them have one that works.
Right. I mean, there's lots of theories,
stuff, you know, but I've never.
I mean, he threw out Tesla's name, something to do with like Tesla's stuff. But I mean, these concepts have been out there for a long time, and there's a lot of conspiracies that Area 51 come in there and they snatch it up and the people disappear. Okay, fine, whatever. But the point is, yeah, this guy's not going to be out there making $60, $67 per blueprint, that could power your whole house for free. And I mean, give me a break. And he was saying, so the rest of the world's going to burn around you, and you're going to be the light, in the middle of the city. You're going to be the only one with power, and your kids will be protected. I'm like, if you're the only one with lights on,
turn them off. They're going to come eat you. Turn those lights off.
Yeah, they're all coming for you.
Exactly. Here I am. There's meat right here, and we got power.
Right.
Who's the meat? It's you. Long pork, the two-legged long pork. You know what I tell people? I tell them, don't be the long pork. That's the top prepping advice. Don't be the long pork. There ain't nothing else to eat. It's you.
So yeah. So it's a scary thing. I mean, we both know, Greg, this is a very literally worst case scenario. I'm going to be blunt. Even if you have a significant amount of money to put into this, it's going to be difficult to survive. My philosophy is, I'll give you kind of my three basic philosophies for anybody out there listening that wants to survive a long-term grid down EMP collapse. Okay. Number one, understand the threat. Educate yourself on what the world's going to look like, because everybody wants to just run out there and start buying prepping supplies. Wrap your head around the game plan it in your brain first. Okay. There's a lot of historical books on famine that you must read to understand how people are going to work. Red Famine by Ann Applebaum is probably the best. Dark Secrets of SHTF Survival by Selko Begovic is another one. There's Mao's Great Famine is another one. There's books on the Holodomor, books on the Holocaust, and the conditions in the Warsaw Ghetto, which could be kind of similar to an early EMP. Read these books and look at what humans did to humans. And these are deeply religious humans that had tight family connections, that had life skills you don't have, okay, that had a work ethic that most Americans don't have, right? And these people still were eating each other, essentially, right? And look at what happened. This idea, it's America, we're different, we're past that, we're going to hold hands, sing kumbaya, work together, everything's going to be just fine. That's not
ever. We'll be the worst place ever when it goes that, because we're the least prepared. Like you said, we don't have the work ethic. We've had it soft. Our people got no concept for this. All those people came from hard times. They're already in a hard scrabble situation. They knew how to survive that. Hey, one of the things I've done on my channel early on is I put videos up about wild foraging for wild medicines. I mean, you can't carry everything with you. I mean, I do advise people to put out caches wherever they can to hide stuff, whether it be food, filters, water filters, some little medicinal stuff, and the fire starter, things like that. You need to have some caches. I use code words. I flip words around like nug, if you know what I mean. It's a flip word. But nugs get hungry. You got to feed them kibbles, if you know what I mean. You need to put some.
That's right.
Yeah, my nugs get hungry. I have to. I like to ask my people.
You got to feed them. That's right.
Have you hugged your nug today? Happiness is a warm nug. But anyway, all that aside, you got to be able to protect yourself, protect your family, and caches are important. But you still can't carry all the water with you. You can't carry you may have to leave home. You may have to go on maneuvers. But if you don't leave home, they may ransack your house. Then anything in it's gone. So the only thing you might have is something you might have buried somewhere else. That's why you want stuff that you can bury as much as possible. But then again, I say that when you go on these maneuvers, you're just going to have to be living quietly, maneuvering quietly, and be unseen if it comes down to that. But if it don't, uh, having the skills to know how to acquire what's already out there, knowing how to eat from the land will be crucial.
Well, I think that's also that's going to be very difficult too, because you're going to have 330 million other Americans stripping the land bare of every tree, every deer. You're not going to see a brown living creature.
Oh, there won't be no.
Yeah, you're going to be eating cattails and pine cone soup. So my philosophy kind of is, I would really caution you. The life skills are really important. You need to learn that stuff. But I would highly caution anybody with, and I know you're not advocating this, but like the open road mindset where you're going to live off the national forest, live off the open road, have a location to go to. So in my book, Survival Theory, I lay out the threats, what you need to understand. So that was the first thing, understand what's coming. The second thing is kind of have a plan to deal with the worst case scenario, not the best. So kind of modern prepper, philosophy is we'll start easy, start prepping for a tornado, work your way up to a hurricane, and slowly build your stuff up. My philosophy is you're never going to get enough supplies to where you're prepared for an EMP, right? So wrap your brain, come up with a game plan for the hard thing. You may not be able to afford everything, but that's where your mind is focused, right? And then any of these other minor scenarios, walk in the park, right?
Yeah.
Gravy, right? So do that. And so like if you don't, most people probably have an uncle somewhere, a third cousin that has a farm somewhere or lives rurally. I put 7 different options for people on a complete budget on how to get out of a city and have a plan ahead of time to go somewhere where you're not dependent on, the kind of, again, the mindset is, stay in your home. It's your place of safety. It's your safe environment. You have, food in your cupboards. Well, that's going to run out, and then everybody says, stay there until it gets so bad that you're forced to leave. In my opinion, if you wait 3 weeks in, you've ran out of food. Neighbors are killing, gunshots all day and night long in your town. Okay. People killing each other over the last can of peaches. That's the last time you want to be on the open road traveling to your cousin Bob's farm. You need to get there early, right? And avoid the death and destruction that's coming 2 weeks, 3 weeks down the road. And in some cases 1 week, depending on where you live. But
there'll be warlords that'll have choke points on the road. You won't get past them. They'll shake everybody down. So
I say you got 3 days. You got 3 days to get out of the city. You got 4 or 5 days to get, in the open road to kind of get to where you need to go. But if you're still out on the open road, and the country we talked about, the country's going to fall apart a little slower. But yet you are absolutely right. You read Selko Begovic's book. It will turn into warlords. People are going to run out of food. They're going to start banding together. They're going to start raiding each other. Groups are going to fight groups. They're going to absorb groups. They're going to defeat groups. And eventually you're going to end up with the biggest, baddest dude with the biggest, baddest gun who's willing to check his morality at the door and do the worst possible things. That dude's going to be leading the groups. I think it was Dr. Baker that said, it might have been Dr. Graham, I don't know. One of the EMP commissioners, said that, it's a continental time machine and, it killed 90% of the population, but you don't want to be around the other 10%, right? So.
Yeah, there'll be some bad hombres. There will be some bad hombres. They're going to be tough.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's stuff that people need to be aware of. We're also trying to form survival tribes in our a lot of my prepper followers. We've got a network.
You need a group. Yep.
Survivaltribenetwork.org. So
good.
.com. Survivaltribenetwork.com. I'll put links to this, and I'll put links to the EMP Commission or task force, and send me links to your books and your links in the email, and I'll put them on this video when I post it. And when we get done, I want to talk to you a little bit about a conversation I've had with a state rep, state senator here that might be relevant. We need to think about in our commission. So I'm going to food for thought.
Go for it.
So and we'll talk about that offline. So we've been on here for about almost an hour. But the key things, guys, is to get ready, to be prepared. Like I said, you need to wrap your mind around what's coming. You need to be mentally, physically, and spiritually prepared as much as anything else for what's going to come. It's the mental side of it, the mental fortitude is going to probably be more important than anything you put in the cupboard. So yeah, you can pack your cupboards up, and you should when you can. Well, one other little tip I might give: if you can get out to that farm, get out to that place. The thing is, that farmer's going to be in the same situation you are in a part, because he's going to have all these tractors and equipment to farm, 100 acres of land, 40 acres of land, and then that stuff working. Ain't none of it going to work. He's going to need people who can farm and grow stuff to manually work the land like the old days.
Exactly.
They're going to need labor on the farms like they needed a long time ago. If you know how to garden, if you know how to farm, and you get yourself to a place like that individual who can't use their equipment anymore will be willing, once they realize that their land they can't do nothing with it, and all the seeds they bought from Monsanto or whoever it is now aren't going to be available anymore. They're going to be willing to cut deals. So buy seeds now. Buy seeds. Have seeds available. Get you some gardening tools. And when you go, have something to offer. Hey, don't go in and say, hey, I'm going to move in on you. No, they don't want that. But if you come in and say, hey, I got a deal for you. I got seeds. I got tools. If you just let me work this corner of the land, you get half of what I grow. Sharecropping. And they're going to go, hey, I can't do nothing else today anyway. And I got an ally here. We can have each other's back in the tough times. Hey, bingo, you got it.
Hey, Greg, it's so funny because I think, how did you get an advanced copy of my book? Because I don't think, how did you get it? That's one of my strategies. So one of my strategies is, even if you don't have an Uncle Bob, okay, align yourself with a rural farmer. Reverse engineer the Google Earth, find a farm that's on a dead end road somewhere. You're probably gonna get 10 doors slammed in your face. And this isn't an easy thing. I'm not saying this is a simple solution, but if you don't also have $2 million to hire me to build you a survival retreat either, you have to do what you have to do. Find a farmer, get to know them beforehand, so you're not a stranger showing up on their door. Offer to help them buck bales in this, in the summer. Hey, I'd like to learn about farming, on the weekends. Can I just come out free? Let me just help you. I'd like to learn more about farming. Most farmers, their kids have grown up and moved to the city. You take some young guy with strong muscles come and say, hey, I'd like to learn about farming. They're going to be like, come on in, boy. Let me show you how to drive a tractor. And they'll have you on that thing in 10 minutes, right? So get to know a farmer like that. I actually know, I have recommended this to the clients that were on the lower end of the spectrum that couldn't afford things. I actually know people that have done this. I have a client that made friends, and they parked their RV on the back corner of a farmer's property, and they go there and they help them. They share a garden. They garden together. And then what you do is
desperate for labor.
Yeah, what's that?
You hire people, and if you do, they'll steal everything you got.
Exactly. So what I tell people is, instead of keeping all your survival food, your supplies, and a lot of your extra ammunition in home, find the storage unit closest to that farmer's house, okay, that farmer's location. He put in a storage unit near the closest one to his house. Then when you show up, so I'm also not saying to show up to your local farmer and say, hey, I'm a prepper. The end of the world's coming. I'm here to save you. He's going to think you're nuts. Just offer to help him. Just don't talk prepping. Don't talk survival. But you build a relationship with him. And then after the event happens, when you show up at his front door, he knows your face and be like, hey, by the way, this is what's happening in the world. And I got extra seed. I got food. I got extra, gardening supplies, whatever else. And I'll share. We'll work together. And like you said, they're going to need you. Their tractors are going to be out of fuel soon, or even if they're still working. So, yeah, I mean, that's one of the strategies I lay out in my book in detail.
So there you go. Well, I've already went through this thought exercise. Basically, I got my own little farm here, and I know what it's like to try to do that. But I'm in a kind of an urban setting almost, so it's not the best place. But yeah, I know exactly what that is. I grew up on a farm, so.
Well, people hear us talking and they say, this is so far above I can't do anything, right? So it's like kind of the ostrich thing. Like if I can't wrap my head or my hands around this scenario, I'm just going to put my head in the sand and pretend this doesn't happen, or I'm just going to figure it out when the time comes. My strategy, I put 5, 6, 7 different strategies in here for you to consider different ones, maybe combine a couple of them. They're going to take some legwork ahead of time, but you know, if you can't afford a survival retreat, you know, 3,000 acres and the bunkers and the stuff that I do on the side here, you know, do at least have a plan for your family, because at the end of the day, you're going to be thinking back to this conversation that me and Greg are having right now, 2 months into this event, and you're going to be sitting there thinking, man, I wish I would have followed that advice. So
I don't know what better advice any prepping channels ever gave anyone than what we just said right here, right now. And so for those few of you that listen to the end, you got a bonus.
That's right.
The best prepping advice, period, out there, bar none. So anyway, John, I really appreciate you. You're awesome. You know what you're doing. You've been part of that serve team. You know, you've definitely a SEER team. You have walked the walk, talked the talk. You're out there consulting the rich people how to survive, but you're seeing what it's going to take for everybody else. You are going above and beyond, because I know darn well that, you know, all us in this EMP task force, we don't get no money for this. We're doing this out of,
nope.
A lot of people don't realize that we do this out of our own time, out of our own pockets. When you're talking about all these trips you were taking, I know you paid for those.
Didn't get dime. Yep.
You know, I've done this kind of stuff with Power Grid Defense. I chaired 2 Power Grid Defense conferences and lost a lot of money on the last one, actually. And, you know, when I was in the National Space Society, when I was 10 years the director of the policy committee, that's how I learned a lot about the workings of Congress and what really works. And, you know, for over 20 years, I was supporting that stuff. I did all that out of my own pocket. A lot of people don't understand that the people that push society along are the people that are really out here on their own dime doing it. Yeah, there's the big corporations. There's the people that get some pay to do different things. But the people that are really pushing to make a difference, that are fighting for what we citizens need, we're operating on our own. And I know you're operating on your own. So it's people like you, people like Command Sergeant Major Mike Maybe, people like our late friend, Dr. Pry, who are my real heroes. So keep up the good work. I really appreciate you. And guys, check out the links below. Some people don't understand. Just check the show notes or the pin note that will be in the comments section, and you will find these things and more. I'll put a lot of content in there for you guys to look at. So, John, I really appreciate you, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for having me on, man. I really enjoyed being with you here today.
No, we got to do this. We got to do this more often. It's been a while. We've been on a couple.
Yeah.
It's been a while. And everyone, just to check the links. Please do that. And I'm going to stay on board with him for just a minute more. So to everyone else, I'm going to say thank you for watching, and Greg out.